All right. Good morning, everyone. We are going to have a discussion based on psukim, but fundamentally in a midrash, and try and understand the nature of free choice when we know everything, which is if Hashem reveals to you, and Hashem does open miracles, he does the 10 plagues, he splits the sea, he gives us the Torah. Do you really have a choice when it comes to accepting it? So we're going to look at this midrash, but the essence of the midrash is really asking the question that since God, all powerful, all knowing, all present, everything we know about Hashem is revealed, do you really have a choice when you say, yes, we'll do it? And that's going to be the crux of what we're going to talk about today, which is trying to understand the nature of acceptance when, how can you not, basically? Like
It's really something that this group of people said, we'll do it.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
No, but I'm saying, but even like, we're going to see, like, I'm going to present to you all sides. And it's undeniably the Jewish, again, according to most of the midrashic material and our rabbinic tradition, the Jewish people accepted something which the rest of the world was not interested in. So 100% we accepted it. My question is, on that level of acceptance, was there really a choice for us? There may have been a choice for the non-Jews because they weren't God's people. God hadn't taken them out of Egypt. God hadn't split the sea. God hadn't brought them to the mountain. The point is, I don't want us to think that the midrash I'm going to teach you about, a very famous midrash, about a mountain being hovered over the people's heads and God saying to them, accept it or I'm going to kill you, is not really literally what's going on there. What we the understanding of that midrash is God is saying, I have the power to do that. I have the power of life and death. Do you accept the Torah and the mitzvah and that way of life? And so when Bnei Yisrael said yes, of course, does that yes mean anything? That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not, like it's a challenge, which is God is all loving and all kind and all benevolent and everything else that we know about it. But at the same time, God is all powerful. God has the ability to bring suffering and pain. Everything comes from Hashem. So what does it mean to accept wholeheartedly the Torah from an all-powerful God? So let's see how it unfolds, okay? I really want to hear your questions and comments on this because it's something that I'm curious to see where you're thinking about this, because I want to take something which, again, it's a midrash which many of us hear when we're young, or it's a midrash that we hear every now and again, whether it's Parashat Yitro or it's during Shavuot, where what does it mean, all of this? So have a look. And source number one, we're talking about the sound and light show that was Matan Torah, where it says here, Vayhi Vayom HaShalishi was on the third day, B'hiyot HaBoker, and it was morning. Vayhi Kolot Uvrakim Va'anan Kaved Alaha. And there was thunder and lightning. And there was a very thick cloud upon the mountain. V'kol shofar chazak me'od. And there was a very loud shofar sound. Vayecherad kol ha'am asher b'machaneh. And the entire people were terrified in the camp, which is basically, this was, somewhere between an earthquake or a volcano or a combination. And it was just like we talk about the fire at Matan Torah. We've got smoke, we've got thunder, we've got lightning, we've got shofar. Like, this is very incredible thing. And the response is that the people are terrified. Okay? Yeah.
Sorry, quick question. Who blew the shofar? I never thought about it.
So that's
Weird.
that's Hashem blowing the shofar.
That's the idea.
Hashem
Never
is,
thought about it.
yeah, no, it's a great question. And that's part of Yemot HaMashiach, is that God will blow the shofar and gather the exiles and bring everything in. But this shofar, it's a loud shofar. You know, normally when a human being blows a shofar, it starts off loud and goes quiet at the end. This idea is it starts off quiet and gets louder and louder and louder, because God he doesn't run out of breath, as it were. So this notion is, this is terrifying, okay? This is the worst.
It's really not the worst. Have you been in earthquakes? That is really terrifying. I've been in a couple.
Okay,
It
no,
trembled.
again,
No, but
yeah.
it said it trembled. Oh no, the people.
The people trembled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
have you ever been in an earthquake?
No.
Well, I've been in a couple. It's really terrifying. So I'm sorry.
No, but that's
In
what
one
I'm
sense,
saying.
you can
I'm
relate
telling you
then.
that I think this is a combination of all of those factors. This is, all of nature really there. Like, I want you to imagine that Mount Sinai is erupting. Okay? There is this type of thing. The ground is shaking. There is thunder. There is lightning. There is smoke billowing out of the mountain. It's about to erupt. This is terrifying the people. And then it says in the next verse, "Vayotzeh Moshe et ha'am." So Moshe had to lead the people out, likrat Elohim, to greet God. Presumably they were scared to go. Min ha'machaneh, from the camp. Vayityatzu b'tachtit ha'har, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Okay, that is the pshat, the way to understand the verse that's going on. Now, on a midrashic level, there's a lot happening here. One of the famous midrashim that we have is God did all of this because we had fallen asleep. We literally had slept in, and this is the custom which many of us have of staying up for Shavuot, is because for the original Matan Torah, we fell asleep and God woke us up, as it were, with this thunder and lightning show, saying, this is your alarm clock. You're meant to be up here at sunrise, and you guys were so excited you fell asleep.
And he takes them closer to it.
Correct.
He wakes them up. It doesn't say run for the hills. He actually leads them towards the trembling. And
correct. Moshe has to make them, because Moshe has to bring them out, because they don't want to go towards that. They're terrified of what's happening here. And then it says here that they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now this phrase here, they stood at the foot of the mountain, that's going to be the basis of part of our discussion today, because it can also mean that they stood under the mountain. Okay, so we're going to see all of that. So before we get there, I want to have a look at a pasuk in next week's parasha of Mishpatim, where it says there, "Vaikach Sefer Habrit." He took the book of the covenant, "Vaikra ba'oznei ha'am," and he, Moshe, read it in the ears of the people. "Vayomru," and they said, "Kol asher diber Hashem," all that God said, "Na'aseh v'nishma." We will do, and we'll understand it later. We'll figure it out later. Okay, we're going to do it first, and we'll understand the details later. On that piece, the Gemara in source number 3, the Midrash says, Darash Rabbi Simai expounded, B'shashik dimu Yisrael na'aseh nishma, when the Jewish people said, we will do before nishma, we will understand the details. Ba'u shishim mibo shal malachei hasharet, 600,000 or 60 10,000s or 60 myriads of ministering angels came down, L'kol echad ve'echad Yisrael, to each and every Jew, v'kashu lo shnei ketarim, and they tied on each Jew 2 crowns, or placed on each Jew 2 crowns. Echad keneged na'aseh, one for saying na'aseh, ve'echad keneged nishma, one for saying nishma. So we definitely have it as a Jewish people. We have the notion that we not only did we accept the Torah, but we accepted it so gladly, we didn't ask for the fine print like most of us would do today. We don't want to see the contract. We're in for it. But now I want to put all of that on its head and look at source number 4. And again, source number 4 is from the same area. It's from Masechet Shabbat, Pechet, 88. And over there it has all the Gemarot, all the Midrashim about Matan Torah. And it says there, Vayidyatvu b'tachtit hahar, they stood at the foot of the mountain. Amar Rav Avdimi bar Chama bar Chasa. Says Rav Dimi bar Chama, the son of Chasa, Melamed shekafa hakadosh baruch hu alehem et har kegigit. That what happened? This is to teach us that it's not that we were at the foot of the mountain, rather God held over the mountain like a gigit, like a barrel. Okay, God held it over or like a bathtub, held the whole thing over our heads. Va'amar lahem, and he said to the Jewish people, Im atem mekablim haTorah mutav. If you are going to accept the Torah, then wonderful. Everything is great. V'im lav, sham tekevoratchem. And if not, there shall be your graves. And as I said before at the beginning, this is not saying that God literally held the mountain over our heads. What this is saying is Hashem is all-powerful. Did we really have a choice when we said Na'aseh v'nishma? Did we really have an option to say, you know what, no thank you, or do you mind if we have a quick read on that one? We're going to get back to you. We're not sure whether you're the God that we want to partner with. I mean, again, it sounds strange what I'm saying, but what I want to tell you is perhaps there is no choice for the Jewish people because Hashem is so great, and Hashem is so awesome, because it's so terrifying. It's terrifying in a wonderful way, don't get me wrong, but it's still terrifying. Like, the Jewish people are overwhelmed and overjoyed to be receiving the Torah, but still part of it, the question becomes, am I really accepting this, or am I accepting it because I don't have a choice?
How are you defining terrifying?
How am I defining terrifying? I mean, you tell me, Esther. I mean, you've gone through the
awesome,
plagues. You've gone.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Could be awesome, like great.
Yeah.
Awesome, like Yirat Shamayim,
Mhm.
Yirat Hashem. So you can describe it as fear
Mhm.
or awe.
Yeah.
So the fear part is, to me, the terrifying, but the awe part is understanding the greatness beneath
Mm-hmm.
the terrifying piece. Like that to me is that I have no choice because I understand so well the awesomeness. I don't have a choice. What else can I do?
Because I accept the awesomeness of God.
What
else can I do?
How can
Yeah.
I walk away from?
And so therefore, okay, I'll take that definition. It's
Makes
a better one. Do it. So did I have a choice? No.
Right. So
you're saying like when they saw, I was going to look for the word, but it doesn't have terrified.
No, it
just
does
says
have
trembled.
right,
Yeah,
right.
so you don't have that like. Can
right,
you go
right.
because like
Either
if
way.
you saw the miracle of the splitting of the sea, you might be terrified. Like this is happening next to me, but you can't go back on not believing something's happening because you've been enlightened. Like you can't go back in the dark
Right.
once you see that. So maybe it's like in one sense.
I mean,
It's
I guess
like
you
that.
I guess you can always do it if you.
Do what?
I mean, you can always go back. Oh, you can't go
I don't
back.
think you
but
can-
you
that's
can
what I'm
always turn. You can create your own reality, in a way.
But maybe that's what. But I was leaning on maybe you can't in a way in that once. I mean, you can like years later, but in that moment, if you saw a miracle, you can't deny the miracle. So you can't say this isn't happening.
So what were they seeing that they couldn't deny at that moment? Were they seeing the
God's-
mountain? Were they seeing what was the trembling of?
Well,
that?
there was a shofar being blown apparently by God. I never thought about the shofar. I just said before you came, who blew the shofar?
But was
So-
that enough? Was that enough
just-
for them to
I'm saying at this
go
point,
all in?
right, even before Hashem says, Anochi Hashem Lokecha, I'm the Lord your God, you have a moment where there's no question here about God's existence and God's taking them out and God's hashgacha, his divine providence in their lives. Like all of the questions before the plagues have been answered. God exists. God is in our world. God cares about our world. And God particularly cares about the Jewish people. What I'm saying is, once you have all of that, and that we love Hashem, but we're in awe of Hashem, did we really have a choice to turn it down? Not in a question of, do we not believe or not? No, belief, there's no question of belief because it's a fact. For that generation, it was a fact. We know God's existence. How do you know? There's miracles. We saw it with our own eyes. We saw that people who weren't us were killed, and we were okay. Through the plagues, through the splitting of the sea. So now God says, come and receive the Torah. It's wonderful. You're going to love it.
Okay, I have an
Yeah.
idea. It may not fit, but maybe it's acceptance in a different level. So like, we learn as grown-ups that there's the level of acceptance, like in your marriage, in relationships, whatever it is, you could be fighting something. I'm not accepting it. La, 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 it's not happening, but it's already happening. So you could choose to accept it or fight it, but it's happening anyways. Does that make sense here?
Exactly
so
right.
He's going to give us the yoke anyways,
yes.
But are we going to actually accept it?
And what does that mean for future generations? This is the Gemara. Just read one more line of the Gemara. It's going to be very clear. In source 4, says there, Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Mikan Moza'a Rabba La'oraita. Rav Acha bar Yaakov said from here, there is a substantial caveat to the obligation of keeping the Torah. For the Jewish people can claim that they were forced into accepting the Torah, and it's therefore what? Not binding, which is when we said we're going to do it. And it says, and let's say that generation was fine. Maybe generations later, like my great whoever's, they accepted it because they had no choice. But me? Why is the Torah binding on me?
What Esther said, that it was a combination of awe and fear.
Yeah.
Yeah. That,
I mean, again, that's the problem of translation.
All the miracles, you're in absolute awe.
Yeah.
And
the hairs on your neck are standing up. Like there's a feeling here. We talk about in Yitro, Vayichad Yitro. The Yitro was he had goosebumps, as it were, because like it's pretty
something.
Yes. What happens?
Our free will.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's another. This is all our classes. They're all about Bechira. Like, do we really have free will if an all-powerful God said, "I'm here to give you the Torah. I've just saved you."
But Rabbi,
Yeah.
I feel like it's the same. Hold on.
Yeah.
We are still I feel like you can choose to either be forced or to accept.
Well, then here we're going to see. That's the next part of the Gemara. You're Laura. You're on fire. You're adding each level here. So Amar Rava comes and says, Afal pi chen, nevertheless, Hador kabluha b'mei Achashverosh. The generation in the time of Purim. Now that we're coming up to Purim, in a month, Dichtiv, they did accept it. Dichtiv kimu v'kiblu haYehudim. The Jews accepted and received. What does it mean? They accepted and received. Says the Gemara, Kimu mashe kiblu kvar. They established that which they had already accepted. So what this Gemara is saying, you could say that 3,300 years ago, we had no choice when we accepted the Torah. But 2,400 years ago, when the Jews were saved from Haman, then we all accepted the Torah wholeheartedly, and we became so it's trying to tell you that there was a moment in history where perhaps there is a question on what was accepted, and was it accepted out of love, out of awe, out of a choice, or was it they accepted it happily, but they really didn't have a choice, even though they wanted it. They didn't have a choice in accepting it. But what's going on in the Purim story? Hashem is Hester Panim. Hashem is hidden, which is telling you there aren't going to be open miracles. What's going to happen? Esther is going to have to put her life on the line and go before Achashverosh. And regular Jews are going to have to fight anti-Semitic Persians. They had to kill the ones who were trying to kill them. Like, there wasn't an open miracle and suddenly, their enemies went away. They still have to go and kill the most anti-Semitic ones who wanted to attack us. So it's trying to tell us, during a time of open miracles, there may be more awe, but that awe creates a lack of choice. After the open miracles, during Purim, where miracles are gone, where prophecy is virtually gone, we have now established that the Jews can accept the Torah wholeheartedly, because no one can say you're only doing it because you have an all-powerful God who's doing open miracles for you. Now I'm accepting it because that all-powerful God is Hester Panim. He's up in Shamayim. He's still watching over us. He still cares about us, but he's not directly intervening. There may be more hidden miracles, but the direct involvement of Hashem has now moved. And so therefore it's saying, when I remove Hashem from being front and center, it allows for an acceptance. When Hashem is front and center at Matan Torah, at the splitting of the sea, with the 10 plagues, however wonderful and awe-inspiring it is, it takes away a little bit my free choice. Because how could I say no?
I know this, I've heard that, this whole line of thought, or whatever you call it, choices, but I feel like the free choice that we have is not really, for me, it doesn't make sense. We could change it in this story. Like, we didn't say, yes, we want the Torah. I feel like Hashem chose us and gave it to us, and then our free will is on whether we're going to do that mitzvah correctly or at all that day. I don't know. I guess I see it as like more of the accepting. Am I in an accepting space if I have to do this, or am I like, I don't want this yoke? Or as a nation, I don't know, I don't really see it as a free. I don't see the free will spot of like, were we? Is there language that's saying we were really being asked, or Hashem chose us?
That's the whole point. I mean, 100% Hashem chose us. We are the descendants of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and we had that covenant, and God made a covenant with Abraham and the Brit Bein HaBetarim. All of these things are on us. However, there's still a part of it which is saying, do you want it now? You're now free. You're free from the Egyptians. Okay, you're free from them. What is it you want now? And that's what we're trying to say, which is, well, when Hashem gives you the Torah or is offering you the Torah, he's not really, to your point, he's not really offering it. You have a choice about keeping it or not. And that's what it's saying. No, you don't. Not really. I mean, we think we do because we're living in a postmodern age, but we don't really have a choice. If Hashem is our God and we accept God 100%, then Torah is binding. All mitzvot are binding on us. We're not this whole thing that we try to create in our heads where, do I want to keep kosher? Do I want to keep Shabbat? Do I want to say tefillah this morning? Like, we can create those choices in our heads, but they're not really choices. They're obligations which we've accepted upon ourselves and were accepted upon us by previous generations.
See, that's the question for me. What you're bringing in, that were accepted upon us. That's the language. Like,
yeah,
it just feels like it wasn't.
They didn't have a choice.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it, which is fine to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I live my life with
what
that.
does it mean when it says Vayomu Kol Asher Diber Hashem Ma'aser Nishma? That's in Shmos. That's a pasuk in the Torah.
You're right.
I mean, everything else.
Yeah, that's Mishpatim. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Whether Hashem asked or not, we accepted. Actually we accepted, because it doesn't say Hashem took the bris and Hashem read it. It says Moshe read it, and they said to Moshe.
But is that there?
All that Hashem has spoken, we will do and we will hear. It wasn't Hashem. To me, I mean, the Medrash says something different, but we're looking in the Pshat. Where is it that says Hashem said, "Do you want this Torah?"
Right there.
Not in those words.
Not openly.
Right.
Moshe,
Correct.
Moshe read the Torah, and they answered Moshe. Whatever Hashem said,
That's a
we
bris.
will-
Yeah.
Right. We will do and we will hear. So
I get-
Hashem,
They did accept it, but at the same time, if they didn't say that,
That's what it's saying.
Anyway.
Yeah,
it'd still be obligated.
no, that's but
No,
Laura, that's
it
the
makes
point.
sense.
There's so many Gemara. Again, I know today is a little bit outside of my normal presentation because we're mainly focusing on in Midrash. The Midrashim are all playing on this, which is we had a strange choice, which was accept or the entire world will be null and void. Okay, which is that a choice?
that's a midrash.
Yes. But I'm saying all of this is saying, but I'm trying to say, what does it mean? Forget the midrash for a second, or I'm not trying to tell us that the world is going to cease to exist. What it's trying to tell you is, how do you accept something where the balance of power is so uneven? Okay, which is we wanted it undeniably. 100%. But I'm saying there was a power imbalance. Okay, God can do anything. God can still do anything and everything. But right then, no, he had the potential. He actively was doing everything. He was bringing manna down from heaven. He didn't have a choice. Okay, so when I'm trying to teach Midrash, I'm trying to give over, what is that Midrash teaching me? That the whole world would have come to an end had the Jewish people not accepted the Torah. It would have gone back to Tohu Vavohu, to utter chaos and void. It's trying to tell us that everything was directed for that moment. And Baruch Hashem, we answered, yeah, we're in. But could we imagine a situation where we could have answered differently? That's what the Gemara is trying to say, which is, we understand, we said yes. Was there a no on the table? There was no no on the table. Now, or not now, during the Purim story, no was on the table.
That's why
We could have said, we were saved, and guess what? We're going to go back and become Persians. We decided to do what? Go back and build it, There were Jews already building the second Beit HaMikdash when the Purim story was going on. But most of the Jews were living in Persia. But after that episode, the Jews after the open miracles, after they had Achashverosh, you had Mordechai as in Haman's place, and you have Esther as the queen. That's the moment where they're all leaving, and they want to go back to Israel to build the second Beit HaMikdash, to be part of that world.
I feel like as a nation, yes, it's so hard for me to even wrap my head around it, because I feel like we're living, which every generation has its own version of so much pushback of God and Torah that it's like, that's nice that they did it then, but we're not doing it now. I don't know. It's hard for me to get into
trying to imagine trying to imagine this, which is post 6-Day War. There was a tremendous feeling of Jewish unity. There was a tremendous feeling of almost like Mashiach was coming, and it was the period after 1967 which really began the Baal Teshuvah movement, where people were reconnecting with Torah. It was a time where people were saying, we want to get our kids in Jewish education. It's time for us to go visit Israel. It's time for us to become more observant. And that was a real growth. Again, it was, and then what came after was a period of anti-Israel and anti-Semitism, started coming up from that, and all the problems with the Middle East. But there was a moment there which continued for a generation or more of connecting with Hashem, which is when something remarkable happens, it does have an impact on our nation, and that's even, not in my lifetime, but in a history which I'm very familiar with and I'm aware of, which is, I know my parents talked about when, post 67, my father went to Israel in 1968 and spent 6 weeks in Israel. He got offered to do, to be a doctor in Israel and chose not to. But I'm saying you have options where you're thinking of, no one was thinking before the 6-Day War oh, we should really be in Israel. Like before 67, there were people. They were, they were refugees from the Shoah, and they were from Arab lands, Jews from Arab lands, and Sephardim, and that was it. And most of everyone else was like, okay, there's little Israel, and we're where we are. And then post 67, things changed. We wanted to connect to Israel, we wanted to connect to Torah. So I think there are times in history where, there's something which happens to Jewish people, and we say, well, what do we do now? Do we connect? So I'm saying it's almost like even at that moment, there was a Himu v'Kiblu. We wanted to reaffirm that which happened in the past. So let's have a look at this and look at some of these sources here. So let's look on the daf. So we've got Rashi and Tosfot. So in source number 5, Rashi says, Moda'ah Rabbah, this large caveat, She'im yazminim ladin lama lo kayamtem ma shekibaltem alechem, yeshem tshuva shekibluha ba'ones. If after 120 people asked that first generation of Jews, why didn't you keep the Torah? They could say, well, we were forced to accept the Torah, so maybe it wasn't a binding thing. So Rashi there is just explaining the Gemara. Says Tosfot, Af al pi shekava hikdimu na'aseh lenishma, even though the Jewish people had said na'aseh v'nishma, Shema yiyu chozrim kasheyiru ha'esh ha'gedola sheyatzta nishmatan. Says the Jewish people, says Tosfot, we have to understand the Torah is not in chronological order. And Perek Kaf Daled, where we said Na'aseh v'nishma, that's in chapter 24 in Parashat Mishpatim. That's actually happening before chapters 19 and 20, before Ma'amad HaSinai. Okay? So when we said Na'aseh v'nishma, that was before we saw the smoke, the fire, the shofar, before we got the first 2 dibrot, where, again, according to Midrash, God gave the first 2, and what happened to us? Either we fainted or we died, and God had to revive us, and Moshe gave the last 8. Based on that, says Tosfot, perhaps we accepted the Torah at the beginning, before God came down the mountain. But when God came and hovered over the mountain, we're like, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't want this. So Tosfot saying there was Na'aseh v'nishma, then there was the great revelation, and then Hashem had to say, are you accepting this? And there's no backing out. This is really for you. So this is what Tosfot says. Even though they had already said, we will do and we will listen, perhaps they retracted when they saw the great fire that caused their souls to depart. Okay, which is, yeah, we're in. And then it's totally terrifying. And you want to back off. No, you're in. There's no backing out. With Tiferet Yisrael, that's the Gur Aryeh on the Gemara here. It says that one can also say that for this he held the mountain over them, that the Jewish people would not say, God forbid, that they would be an annulment of Kabbalat HaTorah, because they, of their own volition, received the Torah and could therefore have been exempted from it. So Hashem held the mountain over their heads like a barrel, so they would be forced to receive it. Why? He gives a different answer. All things that are forced and necessary can never be removed or annulled. Which what he's saying here is, if we just said, we want to keep the Torah, no strings attached, we could come back later and say, you know what? We liked it for a few months. It was great being Jewish, but now we don't want to do it anymore, God forbid. We could have done that. But because God made us to accept it, it changed it from being a choice into being a binding contract, which we couldn't get out of, which is Hashem knows us, and he knows that we're after the initial excitement, something's going to change. So God is saying, okay, I'm glad you wanted it, but now I'm going to make it binding so that you cannot pull out of it.
When Abraham when the Bris Bein HaBasarim
Mhm.
happened, was that a choice of Abraham?
So that's a great point. So just to say for those on the call, when God revealed to Abraham in the Brit Bein HaBetarim that we would be everything was going to happen in Mitzrayim, that we would be slaves for 400 years, etc., and God will judge those people. Did Abraham have a choice? So there we go back into where Abraham is having questions with Hashem. Hashem is saying, you're gonna be like the stars of the heavens. You're gonna be like the sand on the seashore. And during one of those moments, Hashem says, Abraham says, "Bameh eda, how will I know?" And there, because you want to know, I'm going to tell it to you just how vivid it's going to be. I'm going to show you just how how troubling it is to the Jewish history. So the Jewish history is going to be. Now, did Abraham have a choice in that? He didn't have to know. You wanted to know? You want the truth? I'm going to tell you what it's going to be. I don't think they could handle I don't think Abraham could handle exactly what he was told, because it was very dark. It was a hard vision to take. But I guess if someone would ask you, can you really show me what it's going to look like? That's what Hashem showed him. So I don't think that was Hashem keeps on promising you these things. And again, the Brit Bein HaBetarim, according to the Ramban at least, was the first time that God spoke to Abraham before Lech Lecha. So by that one, he could have just been asking a question out of ignorance. How do I know? And then Hashem did it. If you read it, if you understand the Brit Bein HaBetarim is happening after all the other prophecies, then maybe it's Hashem kind of like, you really want to know? I'm going to tell you. But it's a little difficult to bear, because for the Ramban, that's happening before Lech Lecha. It's really early. It's when he's 70, not when he's 75. There's a different piece. So the Midrash here in source number 8 says there's a different thing which the Jewish people are struggling with, which is, what are they accepting? Are they accepting? And the Midrash Tanchuma here is really is fascinating, because I think it talks to some of the difficulties which people in our own community and in communities around the world struggle with, which is the difference between what's written in Torah and how many, and the Torah Shebaal Peh, and the oral Torah, which is, I'm happy with what it says on the paper, but I don't want all the rabbinic laws. And it says here, if you want to say it was the written Torah which God had to force them, don't say they had a problem with the written Torah, because we already said Naseh v'nishma, and it's easy and it wasn't too much effort. They were happy to do that. Rather, what was their difficulty was accepting the oral tradition. Because the laws are very precise, and there's easy ones, there's harder ones. Says the Midrash, but we know, really understanding the Torah Shebaal Peh, understanding rabbinic law, requires tremendous amounts of efforts. And it's really hard and difficult, and people complain and they struggle with it. That is what Hashem made the Jewish people accept. And that had to be binding, because it was just so hard. I want to turn over and give you some chassidut. And often, again, I thought, since I'll put all in one class, something which I don't do often. Number one, bring you a ton of midrashim, and number two, bring you some chassidus. So the Piasetzner Rebbe says in source number 9 that God covered them with a mountain, it doesn't say literally lifted over them, but rather covered them like an overturned barrel, surrounding them with the mountain. This is what he says here. This was so that the world in its everyday manifestation wouldn't be surrounding them, and the Torah would be only a hidden treasure. Rather, all of them would be in the light. And now, after that, we need to pull that consciousness into ourselves always, as if we are surrounded by the mountain, so that we realize that we are always completely surrounded by holiness, and our hearts are aflame with God's consciousness. And if we can't do this always, we should at least set regular times for this awareness to manifest within us. So this is a completely different way of understanding Har Kegigit. And it's saying, no, don't see it as a pressure that God is putting on us. Rather, Hashem is protecting us with the mountain of Torah. And it's saying, take this moment in Jewish history, take this moment of revelation with God and allow it, that consciousness to transcend, and that you carry it with you wherever you go in all of life's challenges and tribulations, so you can always know, just as then my ancestors had full awareness and knowledge of God, so too we, whatever struggles and challenges prevail us, that we know that we can prevail, that we can get over them, because Hashem is with us. So we started the question, which was, and again, the Hasidus is just a very separate piece, but we started asking, if the Torah was forced, how can it be binding? And I think we've shown that there are ways to answer it, which is that perhaps even a huge desire to want something doesn't mean that it lasts forever. So you need to have, some rules in there to keep you in the game. I think, and there's also that part of, there's always parts of Torah that we love, and there's parts of Torah and Yiddishkeit and Yahadut that we struggle with. And it's telling us, it's not a pick, I say in English, in England, a pick and mix. You can't choose what you want. It's not a la carte. You've got to, you have to have the whole thing. You can't say, I want this and I don't want that. And so therefore, we're all in to do and accept all of it. And finally, that piece at the end is to try and tell us that when it comes to thinking that Torah is a yoke and that Torah is pressure, it's also there. It's also a light. It's also there that in those darkest times, in those troubling times, that really there's so much that we get out of it. It can really protect us and help us when we need it most. All right.